Here are the top 10 things that may be harming your relationship and you don't even know it. But first, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Dr. Vanessa Milagros, and I'm a licensed mental health professional. If you learned something here today, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave any comments you have down below. Let's get started. Number one, the silent treatment. Now, we all may have used this from time to time, but the reason why the silent treatment can be so harmful to your relationships is because if you do it little by little over time, it impacts everything. The silent treatment is actually a form of emotional withdrawing, where one person avoids communication with the other in order to punish or control the other person. Now, this behavior can be unhealthy when it creates an emotional distance between you and your partner. This is because you're not actually working to resolve the problem and you're creating more mistrust within your relationship. Now, is taking a break, is taking a pause healthy? Yes, but we're focusing on the unhealthy patterns that you may not realize may be slowly damaging and hurting your relationships. So here's an alternative instead. I want you to work on expressing when you need a break and when you will come back together to problem solve. So if you need that time, that's totally understandable. But when are we going to come back and talk about this and honor that agreement between you and your partner? This is going to be difficult, but it's going to be healthier and more beneficial in the long run. Let's go on to number two, constant criticism. Now, many people disguise this as, oh, I'm just a pessimist and I don't take things too seriously, or I'm very overcritical about things and that's just how I am. Nonetheless, this can still be really damaging for relationships, because if you're constantly focused on your partner's flaws, their failures, their shortcomings, nobody wants to hear about how they fall short every single time something happens. The same way you wouldn't want somebody else only focusing or hyper focusing on your mistakes only and only seeing you for that. Now, this can be done through negative comments saying, oh, I'm just joking, but still the comments that sting, belittling your partner or their accomplishments, or accentuating their flaws and their growth areas. Listen, sometimes we are our own worst critics, and sometimes we allow others to be that for us. And so it slowly erodes out a relationship if your partner is only focusing on the negative and chooses to not focus on anything good. Yes, we all have flaws, but in addition to constructive criticism, which this would be healthy, what are you also doing? Are you also using words of encouragement? Even if that's not your love language, even if you're like, listen, I don't need words of encouragement, I just need you to be kind. That goes a long way. So you don't need to tell somebody how great they are every day of the week. But if you're going to criticize them, make sure it's constructive, make sure there's feedback, make sure you're not using words like always or never, because is that really true? Do they always fill in the blank? Do they never fill in the blank? Instead, what I'm going to encourage you to work on is coming together as partners, as a team, to say, you know what? Yes, this is your growth area. Yes, this was your mistake. Yes, this is not an area that we need to stay where we are in. How can we work together? How can I help you? How can you help me in order to resolve the problem and to move forward together? Number three, passive aggressiveness. And this is where someone expresses negative feelings indirectly. This can be through sarcasm or small little digs to where the person is left confused. Are you upset with me? Are you not? There's no real actual confrontation about it. It's under the radar. So the person has to question if you're upset and ends up almost tiptoeing around that because they don't know what's going on. And you, on the other hand, if you are the one being passive aggressive, you are tiptoeing around that too by not being direct with the person. And there's a difference between being direct, honest, and kind versus direct, honest, and hostile or mean. Because at that point, you're most likely doing it to hurt the other person. Over time, passive aggressiveness can lead to misunderstandings, unresolved issues, mistrust, and it prevents emotional vulnerability with you and your partner, which you should eventually work towards. And it also prevents open discussion, which is extremely healthy in a relationship. So here's what I'm going to suggest. It's going to be really important for you to practice communicating with your partner. Easier said than done. I get it. But subtle passive aggressive comments are indirect. They don't express how you truly feel about something, and it does not have the goal of working through this in order to overcome it. As partners, there are going to be things that you're not going to want to talk about. It's going to be uncomfortable for you to talk about, but that's the whole point of being in a romantic relationship. We can talk about things that are uncomfortable for the both of us. We can talk about things that we need to work through. That's what sets us apart. We've decided to be together, and so this is a part of our responsibility as a couple, as a unit, is to work through these things despite them being difficult. And if you find that you have trouble still doing this, add in a third party, such as a therapist, in order to help you work through these things. You tend to reserve your normal behaviors of lashing out or yelling or screaming or whatever it is that you do that's unhealthy. You tend to reserve that a little bit more when you're next to a third person, right? Who's listening to understand, but also to help you. So don't be afraid to start couples therapy if that's where you both are at. Number 4, jealousy and control. Jealousy that is used in order to control your partner's actions stem from insecurity. If you're using jealousy to control your partner's actions or behaviors, This is always coming from insecurity on your part, and you have to know this. This includes monitoring their activities, not for their safety and well-being, but to know what they're doing, when they're doing, who they're doing it with. Another example is restricting friendships or demanding constant updates. There are many other examples of jealousy and control and how that can ruin a relationship. But it really comes down to the dwindling of trust and independence, because you guys were independent when you weren't a couple. Now you're one, but you still have your own independence. And so it's really healthy to have things that you do together, but things that you do apart. This is all part of the balance. And so if you're always wanting to constantly know where they are, who they're with, when they're beyond their safety or just natural concern, then you have to take an honest look at yourself and say, okay, is this healthy? Would I want this done back to me? Am I holding resentment towards my partner for something that they did? These are all very important questions that I want you to ask yourself if you're struggling with this. And here's what I'm going to suggest. I'm going to suggest that if you need outside therapy individually to work on your own insecurity, that is going to help the relationship. If you would rather go towards couples therapy because you both are jealous and controlling, that is also recommended. But the goal overall, however you do it, is to work on building trust within yourself by addressing the insecurities without trying to control the other person or each other. 5. Gaslighting. Now, we've all heard this term thrown around recently, I'm sure. But gaslighting is where one person manipulates the other into doing what they want them to do. And this is done by questioning their reality or the recollection of previous events. Now, I have an entire video getting into gaslighting, and I'll put it right here for you that you can watch afterwards. However, gaslighting is extremely destructive to any relationship, friendship, you name it. So it's important, and what I'm going to suggest is that you validate each other's experiences. Just because your partner doesn't react the way you would, think the way you would, doesn't mean that it's wrong. If it's unhealthy or healthy, that's a totally different subject. But just because it's different doesn't make it wrong. I wouldn't do that way, so because you're doing it that way, that's wrong. It's different. Now, is what they're doing unhealthy? That's a totally separate question. So instead of focusing your time and energy and resources on making your partner feel less than, or as if it always has to be your way, why not offer some grace? I'm going to listen. I'm going to try to see where they're coming from and not pass any judgment. Now, we're talking about healthy actions. We're not talking about unhealthy, such as understanding why someone is cheating or being unfaithful or being toxic. We're not talking about that. Just want to make that clear. Number 6, stonewalling, and this is a huge one. Similar to passive aggressiveness, stonewalling does not get directly to the root of the problem in order to resolve it. Instead, it's a refusal to engage in conversation with your partner or your spouse. And again, it is as a form of punishment. I'm going to block you out completely. And this usually happens when one partner is trying to avoid conversations for fear that it's going to turn into an argument, for fear that they're going to be figured out because maybe they lied about some stuff, as a use of punishment towards the other person. Oh, I didn't like what this was about. I don't like how this happened, so I'm going to punish you by just blocking you completely out. The other person feels shut out, as if you don't care about them. And it's successful because you, in that moment, do not care about them if you are stonewalling them. Now, we have to understand that stonewalling can come from triggers. It can come from years of trauma that you've experienced. It can come from many different ways. Maybe you learned over time, if I stonewall, I get what I want. And usually most of these behaviors are based off of that. When I react like this, although it's unhealthy, I get what I want. And so I've learned this is what I've got to do in order to get what I want. Instead of what I'm trying to do is help you find an alternative that's going to be healthier in the long run and not damaging to your relationship. So instead, what I want you to do is I want you to work on taking a pause and saying, we cannot have this discussion right now. I'm not in an emotionally healthy place to do it. I'm not in a mentally healthy place to do it. However, I promise you, we will talk, fill in the blank. But it cannot be something that you say, we're going to talk on this day, and it doesn't happen. It has to be something that you follow through. Why? Because it shows your partner that, yes, you need a minute. However, it shows your partner that you are coming back to them because they are a priority for you. And that is the biggest thing. Also, if you're saying, hey, I don't want to discuss this right now because if I say anything, it's going to be out of anger, it's going to be out of hurt, that shows your partner that you are respecting them enough to not call them out of their name, to not say anything that you're going to regret later. And it shows a level of respect for your partner. But you always want to end up following through with what your promise was. When did we say we're going to come back to this? And are we actually coming back to this? That's the goal. Number 7. Some of y'all may not like me for this, but it has to be said. Scorekeeping. Keeping tallies, keeping scores of all of your partner's mistakes, wrongdoings, the things that they've done that you throw back in their face whenever you guys are in an argument or something happens that you don't like. This is so unhealthy. It's like having a backup plan right in your back pocket that you can just take out every time you want to throw it in your partner's face. It does not help. If you want to use certain situations for reference, that's different. However, if you're using it as a form of punishment, if you're using it as a form of, once I say this, I'm going to be right no matter what the situation is, this is unhealthy. Additionally, if you are choosing to be with your partner, nobody's forcing you. That's my assumption, that nobody's forcing you to be with your partner. Despite the past pains and hurts that you guys have experienced, if you are still choosing to be together, then that means on some level, you have chosen to forgive them for the ways in which they've hurt you. And they have probably done the same. And when you don't really forgive them, so you can say, yeah, I forgive you. Okay, fine. I want to try this again. I love you so much. But your unforgiveness comes out whenever the scorekeeping starts happening. Whenever you start bringing that out of your back pocket, so to speak, in an argument or in a disagreement, something that happened years or months ago that you have both decided you were going to move forward from, when you bring those things up, you let the other person and yourself know, I really haven't forgiven you for this. I'm really not over it. And that's okay. That's okay. You can choose to keep those resentments, those hurts forever if you wanted to. But if you're choosing to still continue to be with your partner and not work on those resentments, truly work on them, then you will continue to use scorekeeping and other tactics that we're talking about today in order to feel justified. Because you hurt me in this way, so I'm just hurting you in these little ways, but it's nothing compared to what you put me through. You're still hurting yourself. You're still remaining in an unhealed place. And when you recognize that, as difficult as it may be to recognize, it can start a huge life change for you. Because when you step out of that and decide, this is not for me anymore, I can't hold on to this. I have to work on myself. I have to work through these things. I have to heal from this. I have to let this go. I don't know how, but I have to start. And when you start that, it can change the trajectory of your entire life. And ask anybody who's made the difficult decision of healing from their past triggers and their past traumas. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Staying somewhere that is familiar to you does not make it healthy. And sometimes taking an honest look at ourselves is the start. Number 8, and this is something that I see a lot. Blaming without accountability. There are 2 people in a relationship. Those 2 people, none of them are 100% innocent. None. We are humans. We are imperfect. Just because you can rationalize it and say, well, they hurt me more. Yes, that could be true. And yes, that may be 100% true, actually. You are not blameless. There are things, maybe in a different area of your relationship, but there still are things that you can take accountability for. Not one person in a relationship of 2 individuals can be completely blamed for everything. It just doesn't work that way. So when you're able to say, you know what, you hurt me in these ways, and I'm still holding on to resentments, or I'm still working through these things. However, I also know that I have taken these actions that have hurt you, and I'm sorry for this. That could lead to a world of change. And no, sometimes you can't get there on your own. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you need an outside party to help you, whether that's a family member who's impartial, or a therapist who's impartial, or someone to say, hey, this is not working. What can we do? Number 9, lack of empathy. And this can look like minimizing your partner's emotional needs. Well, I don't need to be told how great I am every day. Why do you need that? When your partner is simply asking for you to acknowledge something. If that small act that you don't need, fine. But if that small act can help them feel more loved and connected to you, what is the harm? Isn't this the person that you're trying to be most connected with? Isn't this the person that is separated from all the other friendships, family relationships that you have? Aren't they on a different level? If you're being in a romantic relationship with them, don't they deserve some form of vulnerability from you? Even if it's not something that you need, they're asking you because it's something that they would like from you. And if it doesn't take much, why would you want to make them feel special in that small way? Just because you don't need it. And number 10, last but not least, relying too much on your partner. Unhealthy reliance on your partner to fulfill your emotional needs, all of them, your happiness, validation, the decision making. In order for you to function, if they've got to be a part of all of those things, in order for you to be okay, this is unhealthy. It places immense pressure on the other person to be everything that you need them to be all of the time. And newsflash, it's not going to work. Because we are all humans, we all fall short. None of us are perfect. So there are going to be things that we mess up on. There are going to be ways that your partner does not fulfill you. Does that mean that you're not going to be able to function that one time that they don't fulfill that need? That's not good. Instead, I'm going to encourage you to learn how to find a healthy balance between how you can get your needs met, maybe on an emotional level, yes, from your partner, but also in different ways. What about your friendships? What about your family relationships? What about the things that you enjoy doing separately? What about the things you enjoy doing together, but also can take a break from? There has to be a form of balance that happens. And that's where you remain in the healthy realm. Thank you guys so much for being here. Again, if there was something that was shared here today that you have a question about or that you enjoyed, make sure to comment down below, like, and subscribe for more mental health videos like this. I'm going to encourage you to watch this video or this video next. Take care.